Welcome to Fellowship Bible Church's Sermon Spotlight, where we take a deeper dive each sermon each week, sharpening our minds with truth and encouraging one another in our daily Christian walk, all through the joys of conversation. I'm Mark Francis, your host for today, and in the snowy, shoveled out co-host guest seat, Miss Abby Linaburg. How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good. Thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Happy snow season, everyone.
Yeah.
And Mark Carey, you have your snow boots on as well. Thanks for being here with us.
Mm-hmm.
So you were in the sermon pulpit for just one sermon this weekend.
Yeah.
How did that feel? Was that a little odd that, hey, you're going back to the old days of just one service?
It's been a long time ago since we
Can't remember.
I can't remember. My memory fades.
Going back
it was nice. It was nice to have actually Sunday off.
I think
Yeah.
I was telling people that too. It's just for those of us that do work on Sundays, wow, being able to sleep in, it's a little bit of a rest.
So one day
Day
I
of
work,
rest.
so
Half a day and then go home and take a nap. Right?
that's right. Yeah.
Well, we are still in the book of Mark and excited to get with you guys here and just diving right in. Just a quick recap. There's a couple different things to highlight. Yeah, we took a big chunk of passage there from Mark 11 and 12, but also within the service, there is a really I think, moving video shared by Tammy Perkins and how it was a Right to Life weekend. And so, Mark, tell us about some of the behind the scenes kind of processing that, because this time of year, every year, we at least take the time to focus on that topic. And, whether it relates to the sermon or not, it was really great to have somebody like Tammy share a story.
Yeah.
And how you incorporated the beginning of your sermon with that was a little unique as well.
Right. Well, and it was a good reminder that along with the over 65 million abortions in 53 years, there are 65 million women who have had an unwanted pregnancy and have struggled with the pain and the guilt of what to do about that, choosing the abortion and then having to deal with the pain and guilt after that. So the greatest loss is the loss of human life. But there's also loss to the woman and the man who oftentimes is in the picture and pursues that and forces that or doesn't want that and is struggling as well. So, sin is, as someone described it, is a malignancy. It spreads. It's never content to stay isolated. And so the ramifications of abortion are immense. I did liken it or try to draw a little bit of a comparison with the evil of slavery,
Right.
Which covered from 1619 to 1863, roughly 250 years, where 10 million human beings are enslaved. The evil in this country. 10 million in 250 years, but compare that to 65 million in 53 years. We can't forget that. So it was a good transition from the video to be able to talk about a little bit on life. I wanted to talk about, but we will have more time to do that. We need to talk about at some point in our own state, our Commonwealth, the amendment that has passed the General Assembly now and will be going to the voters in the fall, an amendment to the state constitution that would probably forever solidify the right to an abortion up through 9 months. It will do away with parental consent. There's a whole list of things that it's designed to do, and it would be an amendment to our Commonwealth.
It's important to stay informed.
Yeah.
And to stay biblical, but also to just continue to engage others, just like the organizations that we're supporting in the community are, whether it be Abba Care and how Tammy Perkins was sharing how God led her into Embrace Grace and what that ministry is doing here at the church. I find it valuable to mention that. I think you did briefly say that from the
in
pulpit
a prayer.
in the prayer,
In my
and
prayer,
and
right.
yeah, there's just a little bit of
Yeah.
a gasp,
Yeah.
So
People, we have to stay informed. You're right.
Mhm.
And, there's a lot of Christians I had read or heard something like only half of Christians voted in this last election. So there are consequences to elections. So, we don't talk about political things, but we will talk about moral things.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes those moral issues end up being political things because there's laws and things like that regulate those things. So, yeah, stay informed, and then the idea was be able to articulate and give a reason for why we believe what we believe. And I think I could have done a better transition with the actual sermon. That's what Jesus did. My introduction was, do you ever, think of things after you've had a robust conversation, think, I wish I would have said that.
Right.
Well, Jesus never had that problem.
Jesus. He knows what's going on.
Yeah. So,
well, before we dive in and hear more from you, Mark, Abby, were you at the one service this past weekend, or did you have what some people might call home church or Sino church? What was your?
Yeah, I watched at home.
Okay.
Gabe was in and out, so he wasn't paying attention too much, but but I was able to watch at home. And I thought Tammy's testimony fit in really well, even with like the spotless lamb idea, because she was mentioning how like she just kind of felt like her sin was too big for God. Right. And then to compare it then to that he was flawless in the way that he died, and having that realization, just like putting those pieces together, it felt really full circle to me. So I thought that was great.
Yeah. Well, you had a big passage to unpack, and you got through a lot of it. I mean, I'd say all of it, but just walk us through what that was like.
Could have obviously gone deeper under another time. I might have almost every paragraph.
Right.
You could have had
a sermon. Yeah. Sure.
But it was kind of a package coming off of the cleansing of the temple. Chapter 11, there's this question, by what right do you do these things? And so there's that question. And then there was another question and another question. So there was a kind of a full court press attack on Jesus. So it was kind of a unit. And it kind of ended with what I think was a honest scribe who had an honest question for Jesus. And then it says, and after that, no one wanted to deal with him anymore because he was having an impact. If you were a thinking person, and if you really were concerned about, I want to check this guy out. I really want to understand where he's coming from. Jesus was swaying people. And we know that there were other priests that were secret disciples, and they had believed in Jesus. This guy might have been one of them. So the unit seemed to fit. And
in your studies, how back to back do you think these things happen here? Because we're within the week. We're after the triumphal entry, and he's back in the temple a second time. It's basically saying, right?
Yeah.
And so, do you feel like that this was same day concept?
Yeah, I do.
Or what do you think in your studies we're looking at that this is happening?
Yeah.
For the disciples and others who are following him to see these things unfold.
Chapter 12, verse 1 begins, and he began to speak to them. Well, they've just, what authority? And then, and he began to speak to them. And then the next paragraph begins with verse 13. Then they sent some of the Pharisees and Herodians to trap him. Right after that, the Sadducees were there. And the last one was the guy who had been hearing this whole discussion and was asking these questions. So I think it was an all-out, full court press on Jesus.
What do you think is on the cutting room floor? Was there anything that you feel like, okay, we need to elaborate here and today that you didn't get a chance to enhance from the pulpit?
What I want, there was one thing I did want to delve into it a little bit deeper. I mean, there's a lot. I mean, even in that first question, by what authority do you do these things? I mean, that really, you could talk about the authority of the Messiah. And when he talked about my house, he was cleaning, he quotes Jeremiah or Isaiah and Jeremiah 7:11. So that we could have talked more about the authority of Jesus and as the Messiah who'd come into the temple, and or could have talked more about the whole thing of taxes, the image, whose image is this? Well, gifted God that, which is everything, and we could spend a whole sermon talking about what it means to be in the image of God, what it means to be submissive to.
That is a fascinating point. And I'll get both your perspectives, because that was a little bit of a light bulb moment for me of how you were implying, Mark, that there is this understood point that Jesus was making to the Pharisees of giving everything to yourself, of, give to Caesar's what is Caesar's and give to God's what is God's. That interpretation is that they knew that what they were meant to be giving was everything of their lives. Is that?
Yeah.
That to me, I've never really thought of it that way.
Yeah. Being created in the image of God. What Jesus is saying here is that's loaded. This idea of being created in the image of God, and that it has, because we're created in the image of God. Number one, created by a creator and in His image. That the responsibility of submitting to that should be obvious. The Creator has the right over His creation. And the interesting part, really, I don't think, I personally wouldn't have much problem with that issue. The bigger issue is the coin with Caesar's, and that was so problematic for Jews. I mean, that's why they had to do the money changing, because you couldn't take a coin with an image that's idolatrous into the temple. So you had this image of who on the back of the coin, and there's different wordings in some of the coins, but it was, like Pontifex Maximus. I mean, this is the supreme father. This is the God, Caesar. And so the Jews were so impeccable in their their attempt to be pure and holy and all that stuff. And yet, they're not even giving themselves to God. But that would have been problematic. And really, I don't like to pay taxes. But render to Caesar what is Caesar's. Jesus said it. Paul will pick up on that in Romans 13. Pay tax whom taxes due. Again, we live in a society where we can vote certain people in who might want to cut taxes, or vote other people in who are going to raise your taxes. Bottom line is, like Jesus is saying, almost like He's saying, just pay your taxes. Trust me, but give the more important question is, give your all to the one who's created you.
I think I constantly underestimate the things that the Pharisees actually knew. Like, I think part of me just thinks that, they didn't know that or whatever. But no, they did know these things, and that's why they're being deceitful.
Right.
Like, even knowing that He's the Messiah, they knew that.
Yeah.
And they still wanted to kill Him. Like, that's right. I don't know. That jumped out to me this time, that it's like, no, they know things.
Yeah. Yeah. These are well-versed people in the Old Testament law, whether it was the Sadducees or the Pharisees, the scribes. These were, they knew their Bibles.
And that stood out to me too.
Yeah.
Of just the fact that you pointed out in the sermon that you have to understand that these Pharisees, Sadducees, rulers and leaders are smart enough. They know their scripture, right?
Yeah.
And so to understand who they're looking for to be the Messiah, and then they had to have known, right, that Jesus was the one, and they were still progressing. So where do you think that turning point is? Like, where, because you're first mentioning it here now in Mark 11 and 12, from unpacking just where Scripture's pointing us to, and they're coming at Him.
Right. And the reason I pointed out here in this sermon, because of that opening parable in chapter 12 of the tenant farmers, the vine dressers, where the owner says, I'm going to send my son. They will respect my son. And verse 7 says, but those vine growers said to one another, this is the heir. Come, let us kill him, and the inheritance will be ours. To me, that's telling.
Yeah.
Now, I realize it's a parable, but there was an understanding. So going back to the Pharisees and religious people of Judaism, they did not live with their head in the sand concerning the Messiah. There had been many messiahs that had come or proclaimed to be Messiah and false messiahs. How'd you find out whether they were false messiahs? Well, you measure, did they come from, the tribe of Judah? Did they come from Bethlehem? And then the bottom line is, to me, was that I mentioned the Daniel 9, where you got the accounting that goes right up to that week. I mean, any thinking Pharisee or person in Judaism would know that Jesus checked all the boxes. He checked all the boxes. And then when you have the parable, this is the son, this is the heir, let's kill him, and we'll take the inheritance, I think is a real indictment.
Do you think that him being the heir is more of the threat than like the miracle worker?
Yeah, there. I do. I think. Ultimately, I don't know what was in the mind of him. I guess ultimately, but there was jealousy. That the idea of a God man was there again. I don't know how much they put scriptures together when it's Jehovah talking in the prophets, and then it's applied to Jesus. But basically, their concept of Messiah was a earthly power person like Judas Maccabee in the 100 and some years before, who wasn't the Messiah, but it would be a Maccabean like, who's going to come and overthrow Rome, and that's what certainly the Sadducees and the Sanhedrin, the Sadducees did not want, because they were in cahoots with Rome.
Mm-hmm.
So if in their thinking, if their thinking was this way, here comes the Messiah, we know he's the Messiah and he's going to deliver the people. Well, that we don't want that. We got a great little deal going on here with Rome. We'll just peacefully coexist. That was all. The coexist bumper sticker was all our cars. And Jesus or any Messiah coming would have disrupted that.
It is fascinating to look at their responses to these three probings of Jesus, if you want to say. I mean, the first one of the John the Baptist question, they had to talk amongst themselves, and they were still a little scared of the people.
Mm-hmm.
The other one, they're saying they responded him with the Caesar coin in amazement.
Mm-hmm.
And then the third and final one, let's look at the parable response as well. That's an interesting observation of they're just looking to seize him
right.
after hearing that parable,
because they knew he spoke the parable against them.
Right. And then the observation of the one leader coming to them, he's like, you're close. You're close. So like Jesus is kind of, I feel like, probing them in a way to get their reactions and their responses, and their true hearts are coming out of like the fear of the people or just let's seize them because we don't want this to change. So you're right. It does in just observing the text, there's something going on where they had to have known.
And don't forget 2 days earlier, we don't know how big the crowd, how many people, but plenty of followers were quoting Psalm 118. Hosanna to the King, blessed is he who comes in the name of the Lord, the King, that he and it's all coming to a head here this week. And this whole questioning of the Pharisees, I brought out that, they're inspecting their lambs in the temple, but that's in a sense what they were doing. They could find something to pit Jesus against the crowd and turn the tables and find some fault.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, they couldn't in the final analysis. They had to make it up and appeal to Rome and appeal to Pilate and sedition and
because he is the spotless lamb. Yeah. Well, and you're listening to this, Abby. Kind of, what are some of your takeaways or observations of the sermon, and just how do we take this and apply this? I mean, I know, Mark, you're constantly talking about applications, but what are some of the takeaways from your standpoint?
Yeah, I think we talk about this a lot, but like the head knowledge versus heart knowledge, where that really matters in the sense, because as we were saying, the Pharisees and Sadducees know these things, but they're using it.
The leafy fig tree.
Yes.
And no internal. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's kind of like internalizing that makes such a big difference in your walk of using God's word to get what you want versus living it out for him and glorifying him. And that, I think that was one major takeaway for me. But then also just kind of the way Jesus responds is it challenges you to wrestle. It's not always giving you an answer. Like even telling that scribe, like, you're close. Okay, why not cross the line? You know, like you're about to die. You know that. So like, why not get him there? You know? Yeah. So I don't know.
It's interesting to see how Jesus did relate what he said, how he debated and argued, and it seemed like he leave a lot on the table in a way. Even with the parable of the that he told about in chapter 12, it's like so they kill the son. Let's take the inheritance. He's exposing the religious leaders and their attitudes, but it's like, well, what's the ending here? Can you give us the ending to the parable a little bit? Now, that was another thing that I left out on the cutting table in terms of sermon, is that I don't think we don't want to leave with the conclusion. Verse 9 of that parable, chapter 12 says, "What shall the owner do with the vineyard? Owner of the vineyard do? He will come and destroy the vine growers, and will give the vineyard to others." He does allude to it with the cornerstone. The stone which they rejected became the chief cornerstone. And this came about by the Lord. It's marvelous in his sight. So some can mistakenly, I think, come to the conclusion, well, God clearly is finished with the religious leaders of the day. Matthew's account, Jesus said to them, "Did you never read the scriptures?" And he quotes that Psalm 118. And then he says in verse 43 of Matthew 21, "Therefore I say to you, the kingdom of God will be taken away from you and given to a people producing the fruit of it." Some of our translations would be saying, it's the same word, will be given to a nation producing the fruit of it. And so some would conclude God, as all the centuries of his promises, finally had enough with Israel. And God's plan was to end his promises with the nation of Israel as a chosen people, no longer chosen people, and begin to shift to something new called the church, which is the body of Christ, where both Jews and Gentiles will come in. Well, that's true to a point. There clearly is a shift. Jesus said in Matthew 23, the same, Mark didn't record it, but in the same old context, he cries, "Jerusalem, Jerusalem, how I wanted to gather you like a mother hen with her chicks, but you were unwilling. So you will not say to me again, Hosanna, or blessed is he who comes, until you see me again." So there is a finality. Now, again, Daniel talked about that. From the issuing of a decree to restore and rebuild Jerusalem until Messiah, the Prince, is 62 and 7 years, 69 years. And then the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. 70 weeks are decreed for the Jewish people. So there's a missing, and the weeks is a 7-year period. There's a missing time thing here for the people. If 490 years are decreed for God's plan for the Jewish people, and only 483 can be accounted for it, and the 483 years take place, and then the Messiah is crucified, there is a gap here. Something is going on, and we know that as the church age. God did change. Now, that was hard for Peter and John and those guys to figure out in the book of Acts, because they didn't want anything to do with Gentiles because they were good Jews. But God forced them out of that, and then we had 2,000 years of the church. The question for a lot of people, and a lot of people accept the fact that Israel is no more, and it's called replacement theology. The church now replaced all those promises of the Old Testament to Israel. It now is for the church. The problem that has to be dealt with is a literal interpretation. Because if you're going to take the Old Testament literally, you can't come up with that conclusion. You got to allegorize it, spiritualize it, come up with some spiritual, deeper meaning than what it was written. Well, that's bad hermeneutics. If we did that with anything of our study of the Bible, we wouldn't end up anywhere.
Yeah.
So you got to go to Romans 9, 10, and 11, where Paul, I think, definitizes this whole thing of what Israel is. I think in those chapters, Israel is referred to like 11 times, and 10 times it's clearly talking about national entity, the Jewish people, Israel. But it comes to Romans chapter 11, 25, and 24 and 25 in there, and says, thus all Israel will be saved. Well, if he referred to Israel all of previous 10 times as national entity, why would you change it and think it refers to the church or something, or something like that? So there's a promise that God is not finished with the Jewish people.
And I was looking at Romans 11 as well, and just verse 1 says, I say then, God has not rejected his people, has he? May it never be. So Paul is basically saying, God's not going to reject Israel.
How some will interpret that is that, because Paul goes on and says, I too am an Israelite. So he says he's not rejected them in the sense that there are Jews who come into Christ and are being incorporated in the body, in the Church of Christ. So any Jew can still trust Jesus and get to heaven. But he goes on in chapter 11 and talks about the grafting in, and verse 24 of 11, for if you were cut off from what is by nature a wild olive tree and were grafted contrary to nature into the cultivated olive tree, how much more will those who are the natural branches be grafted into their own olive tree? And then he says, for I don't want you to be uninformed of this mystery, so that you will not be wise in your own estimation. It's a partial hardening. It's a temporary hardening. Has happened to Israel until the fullness of Gentiles, that whole period of time, is completed. And then he says, verse 26, and thus all Israel will be saved. The deliverer will come from Zion. And he quotes from the Old Testament. So I think you've got to do an incredible amount of hermeneutical gymnastics to supplant national Israel with the church. It's two separate programs, two separate entities in God's plan for purposes. And one day there will be a fulfilling, Zechariah 14:9 talks about, they will see their Messiah one day, and they will mourn. There will be a repentance at the end of that tribulation period and the beginning of the kingdom. But I would have preached another hour Sunday if I had to go into all that.
That's why we're here. Yeah,
That's right.
but it's still valuable to recognize, okay, where are the potential pitfalls of passages that are being either discussed, debated in Christian circles, or maybe even misinterpreted, and how are we to respond?
Yeah.
And again, looking at Scripture literally is going to be the key in everything, I feel like. I mean, if you take things out of the literal context, you're going to be going down a bunny trail that is probably not for this purpose and its intent.
Yeah. Yeah. And I mean, we all do it.
Sure.
No one is perfect in our study and our exegesis and things like that, but we have to strive. We have to have some basic foundational hermeneutical principles that we are going to apply consistently. And otherwise, you're right. we can get into a big mess.
Isn't it fascinating, though, that Jesus was the perfect hermeneutical expert?
Yeah.
Right? And you brought that out in the sermon.
Yeah.
I mean,
Yeah.
just taking a tense
Yeah.
and he's pointing it and putting it back in the faces of the leaders. Be like, you're not seeing this right. The book of Moses, you Sadducees.
Yeah.
You know, it's
He's not the God of the dead. He's the God of the living.
Yeah.
Because even though Abraham and Isaac and those guys are dead, but he said, no, I am the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. He's not I was, I am. And Jesus makes the point. Therefore, he's not the God of the dead. He's the God of the living. You're badly mistaken, he told the Sadducees, who didn't believe in a resurrection.
But what great hope for us today to live in the church age,
Yeah.
to know that we've been grafted in, to know that Israel, he's not finished with Israel. He's going to keep his promises. He's going to return. There is going to be a culmination of the end of the age. It's a great just hope and practical just reminders for us here and now to where we might be getting depressed over watching the news, or we might, see America and just ICE people shooting people or whatever's going on. You're starting to get worried, and you end the sermon to say he has already won. And we sung songs about that this past weekend, and to leave with that hope, that I think is one of the key takeaways for me as well.
Yeah. I think you look back at all the prophecies of Christ's first coming, which were being fulfilled in that, in the story, in the terms of like Daniel, and now then his crucifixion, and the Judas paying the 30 pieces of silver, all those prophetic that were fulfilled literally. It happened. Well, there's a ton of prophecies about a second coming. Why should we not take those as equally literal and study the scriptures and be somewhat experts on prophetic themes? Because, the world is not getting better.
Yeah.
As an old theology of postmillennialism was, things are going to get better, and then Jesus is going to come. Now, Apostle Paul said it's going to go from bad to worse.
Sure.
And but it's literally going to take place as it was prophesied about Jesus in a second coming.
Yeah.
I love it. Thanks for unpacking a lot of these things, right? I mean, there's so much depth here. So continue to all you guys watching and listening to dive in yourself, get into the scriptures and look and have those observations and conversations with others and spur one another on, to where like it's not just going to a sermon or weekend and one and done, but we can continue to disciple one another in these ways. So, Abby, thanks for being here.
Yeah.
Mark, once again, for shoveling out, coming in person.
Yeah.
There's a little debate. Do we do this remote or not? But we're here. We're all here. So thank you guys. And
Talk about a Nebraska boy.
oh,
No, I've lived here more than half my life.
Yeah.
so
Here in
you're a
Virginia.
Virginia boy now.
Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely.
I'm soft and weak like
And
other Southerners.
and warm-blooded, right? Yeah, you need that warm weather. Well, for all you guys watching, listening, continue to share these episodes with your friends. And if you haven't, subscribe so you can get the instant downloads when the episodes come out. Remember that we also have the Fellowship Family podcast here at FBC and also the Global Church podcast, where you consistently get local information and global information about what's going on here at Fellowship Bible Church. And once again, thanks for watching and listening, and thank you guys for being a part of the conversation. And remember that sermons aren't just heard, they're lived.